Acre for acre, the Garden State is blessed with an abundance of heroes, villains, and oddities, and this is especially true of our coastline. Amid the endless debates of Taylor ham versus pork roll, which we hold in the time we save by not pumping gas, one thing North and South both agree on is that the beach is the shore, and no summer is complete without a trip to it. Located between Atlantic City and Ocean City is the town of Margate. As with most shore towns, it enjoys unique homes, access to the beach, and a lively atmosphere come summertime. But wholly unique to Margate is something you just won't find anywhere else. A very special lady, 6 stories tall, 60 feet long, and weighing 90 tons.
This enormous woman will devour us all! Ah!
This is a story about vision, about sisters, and about perseverance. I am talking about that most special Jersey girl, Lucy the elephant. Welcome to Words and Coffee, where we discuss interesting history about the Garden State and enjoy a cup of tasty small batch brew. Today's brew is Kill Devil Rumble by Coffee Shop of Horrors, and the history is Lucy the elephant. Let's get to it. The brainchild of James Lafferty, born to Irish immigrants, he grew up to be an engineer, inventor, and land speculator, purchasing a number of sandy lots in the South Atlantic City area. At the time, AC was little more than a seaside town for bathers and visitors, and a far cry from what it's become today. In some cases, that is probably complimentary. South AC was mostly dune grass, bayberry bushes, and a handful of fishing shacks. Even for the time, Lafferty's sandlots were fairly modest, cut off from the main island by a deep tidal creek and only accessible at low tide. However, Lafferty was a man of vision, and he saw opportunity here. All he needed was the right hook. Something distinctive, unique, and grand that would draw in prospective investors and buyers. What precisely prompted him to go with a giant elephant building is unclear. Though if I had to guess, it might have had something to do with the contemporary popularity of circuses of the P.T. Barnum variety. In any event, he was bound and determined to make it happen. To bring his vision to life, he enlisted the services of William H. Free, a draftsman, architect, and fellow resident of Philadelphia. To be sure, this job was unlike anything that Free, or anyone, had done up to that point. Working within the limitations of the tool and material that were available to them at the time, they eventually came up with the design, consisting of 1 million individual pieces of timber, 8,560 arches, 200 kegs of nails, and 4 tons of bolts and bars, and covered by 12,000 square feet of tin. The project was completed in 1881 and named the Elephant Bazaar.
That is so lame.
I know. It's the lamest thing I've ever heard of.
The name Lucy wouldn't be applied until several years later, but I'm going to refer to her by her proper name for the sake of clarity. From ground level, visitors would ascend a spiral staircase in Lucy's right hind leg. The left side was the downside. Each leg is 22 feet tall and 10 feet in diameter. Climbing the stairs leads visitors to the 18 by 18-foot reception area from which all other rooms are accessed. The body is 38 feet long and 80 feet in circumference. Each ear is 17 feet tall and weighs an estimated 2,000 pounds. Climbing further leads visitors to the howdah, an observation platform atop Lucy's back from where you can see up to 8 miles in any direction on a good day. Howdah. Funny word, right? I never knew this word existed before I started researching this video, and it kept appearing over and over and over again, to the point that I now have an irrational hatred of it. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you will too. The plan was this. Lafferty would invite prospective investors to the top of the howdah to give them a bird's eye view of the properties he meant to sell. It was a gimmick, plain and simple. A 6-story gimmick, but a gimmick all the same. However, it did work. Lucy got quite a positive feedback. But Lafferty didn't stop there. He felt he was sitting on the next big thing in seaside marketing, and he wanted to go all in. The following year, 1882, he applied for and received patent number 268,503 for A building in the form of an animal, the body of which is floored and divided into rooms. The legs contain the stairs which lead into the body, and the building may be in the form of any animal as well as that of an elephant, such as a fish, owl, etc. He patented animal buildings. All of them. Worth a shot. And actually, it turns out he might have been onto something. In 1884, work began on the next elephant, the Light of Asia. This time it was commissioned by Theodore Roget and designed by N.H. Kobres, but undoubtedly inspired by Lafferty's original piece. Lucy's first sister would stand on the shore between 2nd Avenue and Cape May Point. For the price of 10 cents, visitors could ascend the stairs for views of the ocean and Cape May from the howdah. That same year, Lafferty went all in on this elephant craze he had started and sought to outdo himself. This time he went north to what was then the Disneyland of its time, Coney Island, New York. Built 2 years before the Statue of Liberty, the Elephantine Colossus was even larger than Lucy, standing at 122 feet tall with 7 floors of exhibits and rooms. From the howdah, visitors could see up to 50 miles away. Unfortunately, both of Lucy's sisters were doomed.
Doomed!
The Light of Asia had to compete with the nearby Cape May Lighthouse for tourists' attention, and the Elephantine Colossus was similarly outshone by newer attractions. Neither quite got the popularity of their older sister, and after being sold in 1887, the Light of Asia fell into disrepair until 1900 when she was demolished. The Elephantine Colossus was mostly abandoned by 1896 when she burned down under totally not suspicious circumstances. However, in a way, the Elephantine Colossus would live on. See, during a visit to New York City, the owners of a small Parisian cabaret were inspired by the sight of this giant elephant building and decided to incorporate it into their theater. That theater was the Moulin Rouge. Probably unknown to most every theater major circa 2002 was that their favorite movie featured a set piece based on the real-life Moulin Rouge elephant, itself based on the Elephantine Colossus, which was itself based on Lucy the Elephant. That's right. For all your supposed French sophistication, one of the most iconic cabarets of the late 19th century ultimately copied a tourist trap from South Jersey. Moving on. Just before his passing in 1898, Mr. Lafferty sold the Elephant Bazaar to a family that would play a prominent role in the next stage of Lucy's life, as well as the city of Margate, the Gertsens. So named for Anton Gertsen, who emigrated from Prussia in 1844 and got busy with true German efficiency. First, he settled in Philadelphia, where he met his wife Carolyn. Funny aside, they both traveled on the same ship but did not happen to meet on board. A missed opportunity for a king of the world moment to tell the grandkids. From there, the man acquired a fleet of fishing ships, opened a carpet business that was very successful, and sired 7 children. I mentioned his enthusiasm for carpet, didn't I? So what happens when a man with that kind of drive arrives in then sleepy Margate? Well, he starts buying the shit out of the place, of course. See, the fishing boat business brought him out to the shore, and the more time he spent out there, the more he was like, yeah, I'll buy some of this. He bought several tracts of real estate, and when he heard that a giant elephant building was for sale, well, I will note that at the time, she still carried the totally lame handle of Elephant Bazaar, and the moniker Lucy wouldn't be applied for a few more years. I promise you, I'm getting there. The Gertsen children would later inherit the substantial holdings of Herr Gertsen Sr., and indeed expand on their father's legacy. Anthony Jr. would build on the family's property holdings and serve as Margate's city clerk. Henry F. would serve as mayor for 18 years. But it was John Gertsen who inherited the patented elephant building. More importantly, it was his wife Sophia who, according to legend, came up with the name Lucy. Why Lucy? We don't know. Only that they decided she was a she. They maintained the 6-story structure and charged visitors 10 cents to climb the stairs and enjoy the view from the howdah. Starting to get to you, isn't it? John and Sophia soon had their own respectable brood of 3 children. In a way, their oldest daughter, Carol, would usher in the next era of Lucy's life. In the summer of 1901, John and Sophia brought on a young German girl named Hedwig Louise Fehl to be a live-in nurse for their baby daughter Carol. To understand the significance of this, we have to take a step back from Lucy, but I promise you we're going to come back to her. Born in 1889, Hedwig Fehl was a bright child with a love for reading and writing, and tutored by her mother Maria, a nurse who did everything she could to nurture both her daughter's natural talents. Hedwig's sister Berta, younger by 2 years, absolutely adored her. Prior to coming to America, Bernhard, their father, was a former cavalry officer in the Prussian army. Circa 1877, at the height of the Second Empire, this was like rock star status by German standards. Appropriately, he would run a successful harness and saddle business in Quakertown, Pennsylvania, in a partnership with his friend Albert Loeb, who rented horses and wagons in the business next door. Solid business model, right? Hedwig had a close childhood friend in Simon Loeb, Albert's son. All in all, these years in Quakertown were supportive, loving, and comfortable. Until. Momentary aside here, Hedwig's story reads like a genuine fairy tale, and I hope to do it justice. Momentary aside here, Hedwig's story reads like a genuine fairy tale, and I hope to do it justice. Most everything we know about her life was recorded in her TAGEBUCH or journal, which was partly a continuation of the one started by her mother, and later compiled by her daughter, Marie Kobres Bones, into The Elephant Hotel, Hedwig and the TAGEBUCH. It's this one here. And when I say fairy tale, I mean the old-fashioned German kind that skirts the line of bedtime story and child abuse. We gotta knock the protagonist into the dirt by the end of the first act. Thus, Hedwig's early teenage years were eventful, to massively understate it. In July 1899, Maria, Hedwig's mother, passed away of cancer just a few months after her diagnosis, leaving Hedwig and Berta, not to mention her brothers, without their mother. Following that, disaster struck again when Bernhard and Albert's business burned to the ground. To make matters worse, the fire claimed not only the life of Simon, Hedwig's close friend, but of Albert as well, though he died of a heart attack following his son's death. It was a bad time all around. Having lost his wife and livelihood in such close proximity, one can only imagine Bernhard's state of mind. Compromised, I think, is the most fair way to put it. Thus, when he remarried just a few months later and urged his children to refer to his new wife as Mama, one might almost see this as a well-intended, if misguided act. However, between a move to Philadelphia and a Brady Bunch-type family mashup where stepmother's 6 children cohabitated with the 4 Fehl children, whatever his intent, it was probably lost on them. Now, it wouldn't be a fairy tale without a wicked stepmother, and Hedwig got one. Referred to only as stepmother, which I suppose we can't rule out was in fact her legal name, she and Hedwig never got along. She started by insisting that Hedwig refer to her as mother, and Hedwig just wasn't having it. Failing to win her over, stepmother proceeded to write up working papers and sent Hedwig to work at a cigar factory at the ripe old age of 12. Hedwig never liked that job, but actually enjoyed her time at a porcelain cup factory where she got to paint little flowers on the chinaware. All right, that's not bad. And then she was propositioned by the manager's adult son. Because what coming-of-age story would be complete without an inappropriate creep? Needless to say, she promptly left. On top of all this, stepmother insisted that Hedwig's $3 weekly income was now rent. When she refused to hand it over, things escalated between the two. At one point, stepmother stole an antique box that had belonged to Hedwig's mother and was incredibly precious to her. This went on for a year before both Hedwig and stepmother had both had enough. Unable to hide at the office anymore, Bernhard saw that the new Brady Bunch domestic situation was simply not working out and agreed to send his oldest daughter away. The prick. But Hedwig was about to catch a break, and Lucy is about to make her reappearance. In staying with her uncle Emil, she was introduced to the Gertzen family, who happened to be shopping for a nanny at that time. They lived on the ocean and were offering employment, room, and board. At first, Hedwig wasn't entirely sure what to make of this, but was willing to give it a try. And per Hedwig's own account, I could hardly believe my eyes when I came face to face with Lucy at the Gertsons' Elephant Hotel. I had no idea what to expect when I, like so many other young people in 1901, flocked to the new Millionaire's Playground to the South Atlantic Beach in Margate City, seeking employment, room, and board. I had never seen anything like this before, a massive building built in the shape of an elephant. But there she was. In July of 1901, just a few months before her 13th birthday, Hedwig went to live with the Gertsons and Lucy. Her sister Berta left Philadelphia with her, but instead she went to AC to work for a florist who was also related to the family. Hedwig was taking well to her new jobs. In addition to acting as caretaker for young Carol Gertson, Hedwig also became Lucy's first official tour guide. This consisted of leading visitors up Lucy's rear leg into the body room and treated them to the building's history, statistics, which I also mentioned previously. That first year, one guest was a lawyer from Georgia who was so impressed with her spiel that he tipped her a whole $1. That's like $100 today. His name was Woodrow Wilson. Things had certainly taken a positive turn for Hedwig, living at an iconic and rare landmark, finding a nurturing maternal figure in Sophia Gertson, caring for her charge baby Carrie, who she absolutely adored, and attended by other Lucy employees, Frank the bartender, and a man simply known as Cook, who ironically just baked. Okay, that was lame, but the story was getting too nice. For several years, things ran smoothly, until during the summer of 1906, now 17 years old, Hedwig would meet a young merchant mariner, a fellow German boy named Richard Kobres. Now, if you recognize that name from the book's author, you can probably guess where this is going. Yes, indeed, despite some reservations from Sophia, whom Hedwig greatly respected, Richard proposed after several stressful months of radio silence. It seemed that he had in fact written to her, but mistakenly addressed all his letters to Hedwig's former address.
I wrote you every day for a year.
They were married on April 5th, 1910, and what better way to complete this fairy tale than with a redemption arc? Stepmother was in attendance, and her gift? The antique button box she had stolen from Hedwig all those years ago. While her first guide left to enjoy life with her new husband, Lucy's best years were still ahead. The early aughts were some of Lucy's biggest years. The Gertsons acquired a number of surrounding properties and built up their pachydermic park. One of these was the Turkish Pavilion. Previously an exhibit from the 1876 Centennial Celebration in Philadelphia and acquired by Anton Gertson Sr., its stained glass windows and onion-shaped spires were carefully disassembled, moved, and rebuilt in Margate, and then turned into a nightclub by John and Sophia. Across the street was a casino named Gilligan's that they converted into a hotel and renamed the Mansion House. Lucy took her first big hit in the storm of 1903. It's said that the sand rose as high as her knees, and she was painstakingly dug out. However, the storm also undermined her foundation. Thankfully, she still had some elbow room on the beach at this time, and the Gertsons had her moved to a new lot 50 feet back from the water. Following this, Lucy was briefly converted into a tavern, and then she had her second near miss. Since electricity was still kind of a novelty at this time, Lucy was illuminated with oil lamps. One drunken patron accidentally knocked one off the wall, starting a fire. It's unclear just how many of Lucy's million timbers were blackened and charred, but the fire was dealt with in time to save her. After that, management wisely restricted alcohol to the pavilion next door. Things churned along until 1916, when John Gertson passed away unexpectedly, leaving Sophia alone with the children. Doing her best to keep things running, Sophia opened a tent camp on Lucy's beach. It actually became so popular that the idea caught on with a bunch of other Margate businesses. Unfortunately, this ultimately got the attention of Margate city managers, who then banned habitation in tents on all Margate beaches. Because leave it to the man to put down a small business. It was no matter. The pavilion was doing quite well as a speakeasy, and that business kept the truncated Gertson family afloat. Until 1920. The national experiment known as Prohibition affected most everyone, and Lucy was no exception. The pavilion was converted into a rooming house. This and Lucy's dime tours became Sophia's only source of income for several years. However, those dime tours attracted some conspicuous names. In addition to previously mentioned Woodrow Wilson, there was also Vincent Astor, as in John Jacob Astor's son, Gwendolyn Rothschild, one of the DuPonts, Henry Ford, and several Vanderbilts. And this one guy named the Raja of Bong. I knew a Raj in college. He was also into bongs. Disaster struck again in 1929 when Lucy was slammed by another bad storm, knocking off her howdah, which was then rebuilt, but unfortunately not renamed. 1933, America came to her senses once again, more or less, and Prohibition was repealed. Sophia wasted no time in converting the pavilion back into a saloon and acquired liquor license number 1 from the city of Margate. No doubt aided by her brothers in the municipal government, but that's neither here nor there. The 30s were a rocky time. Sophia was getting older and wanted to sell the pavilion, but it was only temporary. Now renamed the Elephant Hotel, Lucy continued running the businesses after World War II. And then came the hurricane of 1944. The tough old girl took a beating, but when the winds died down, Lucy was still standing. After that, things pretty much went quiet. Until 1963, Sophia Gertzen passed away, and her children, a now grown Carol and her brother Joseph, took over as Lucy's caretakers. Lucy had become a staple of the community and remained a beloved icon and tourist attraction for many more years. However, that safety was temporary. By 1970, Lucy had fallen into disrepair and was a far cry from her glory days. Getting older themselves, Carol and Joseph both decided that they had had enough and donated Lucy to the city of Margate. They sold the land, which consisted of rental properties and a refreshment stand, and quietly retired to Florida. For the first time in many years, Lucy was not in the Gertzen family, and her fate was uncertain, and it was about to be called into serious doubt. 1969. After 3 generations of Gertzens caring for Lucy, Carol and Joseph donated the elephant and sold the land. This presented an issue. See, the new owners of the property wanted to demo this historic site and put in condos. Because that's just how we roll in New Jersey. Apparently. Over and over and over again. However, Lucy was not without her champions. Edwin Carpenter and a group of Margate citizens formed the Margate Civic Association and the Save Lucy Committee. Here was the plan. The town owned a piece of property about 2 blocks down the road. They would simply pick up Lucy and carry her to her forever home. Remember when I rattled off all those specs? Lucy is 90 tons and 6 stories tall. Make no mistake, this was doable, but it needed a whole lot of work. First hurdle. Lucy was an old girl. Could she physically handle the move? According to restoration architect John Milner, the timber and ribs were in good shape and could hold up to the stress of the move. All right, so far so good. Hurdle 2. How do you move an elephant building? Well, that is one of the great things about America. You can buy anything here. And I mean anything. There are businesses whose sole specialty is moving whole houses intact, and so the firm of Mullen and Rinaldi were called in to set up the cribbing and tow vehicle. Solid. All right, we got transport covered. Hurdle 3. What's she going to sit on? For that, contractor Fariozzi & Sons would be responsible for pouring a special concrete foundation at the new site. Hurdle 4. Because this wasn't going to be as straightforward as all that, there was, of course, a ticking clock element. See, the new property owners weren't the patient sort. They had condos they needed to build, and this cultural landmark was an awful inconvenience. So the committee had 30 days to complete the move. All right, fine, not ideal, but we got the tools, we got the talent, we got a plan. This is workable. Even with an estimated price tag of $24,000 or $200,000 today. What followed was an intense fundraising campaign. Volunteers went door to door, hitting up every house in Margate. They did bake sales, craft fairs, the works. Even when they came up short by $10K, chairladies Josephine Harron and Sylvia Carpenter, plus an anonymous donor, pledged the balance. It seemed Lucy was going to be all right. However, moving day had been set for the 20th of July, 1970. By July 16th, Lucy had been properly cribbed, untethered from the ground for the 2nd time in her life, and lifted up on special jacks. She was ready to roll. Then came the first hiccup. The committee was served with a legal injunction by the Atlantic Beach Corporation, preventing them from moving Lucy.
Oh, come on!
See, the property owners adjacent to the new location felt that Lucy's presence would devalue their lots. See, on the one hand, my inner property rights absolutist sees their reasoning, but on the other hand, just this once, I'm going to choose to see this elephant-sized dick move for the cartoonish villainy that it is. Alright, fine, this injunction thing is not ideal, like at all, but we'll fight it in court. Probably be fine. Nope. Hiccup number 2. The hearing was scheduled for one day after Demolition Day. One day. The committee threw their Hail Mary. They appealed directly to Atlantic County Judge Benjamin Rim, who actually agreed to come to work on Saturday the 18th. A government employee working on the weekend. Do you understand what I'm saying here? After hearing arguments from both parties, Judge Rim ruled in favor of the committee and dissolved the injunction. Moving day was back on. Monday, July 20th. A year earlier, we landed on the moon. Today, New Jersey was moving an elephant building. Because that is how freedom rolls. Lucy was then met with her third hiccup. Around 7 a.m., everyone was assembled, last-minute checks showed that the move was good to go, and then the fog rolled in. Thankfully, this was just nature throwing a head fake, and by 9 a.m., the air had cleared and the foreman gave the green light to go. Lucy was rolling. A small yellow pickup started to pull. Lucy's massive form creaked and settled as they rolled over the curb onto Atlantic Avenue. The truck was so comically undersized that onlookers questioned whether or not it was even up to the task. Power and telephone lines were temporarily disconnected to allow Lucy's passage. Albert Rinaldi of the moving company and overall project director was a mix of suspense and silent prayer for the whole duration. Afterward, he remarked that this was the most unusual moving job we've ever been asked to perform. TV news crews recorded the procession, newspapers took pictures. By 4 o'clock, an exhausted but very happy crew finally called it a day. Lucy was safely in her new home. With Lucy now safely in her forever home, the committee was able to breathe a sigh of relief. But it was short-lived. She was still a 90-year-old building, and a neglected one at that. Restoration was the next task, but they had pretty much tapped out the Margate community in terms of donations. Thankfully, the publicity generated during the move had reached people across the country and beyond. Folks were completely enamored with this unique piece of Americana, and the donations started flowing in. The Atlantic City Racecourse hosted a Lucy Day at the Races event, with all profits going to the committee. The famous AC nightclub The Five offered the committee a special gala night, which was amazingly lucky considering that club burned down just 3 years later. A number of local schools held events and kicked in some modest contributions as well, with one class sending their end-of-the-year treasury of 68 cents. Aw, that was nice. In addition, the committee applied for and was granted nonprofit status, which now qualified them for federal and state grants. Unfortunately, the grants only accounted for about half of what architect John Milner estimated as $124,000 to perform vital stabilization and restoration of Lucy. And the girl was in desperate need of a makeover. The committee came up with a unique solution in which each of the 62 members would take out a $1,000 loan but would only pay interest, while the principal was covered by the committee itself. Maybe a little unorthodox, but it got them the necessary funds. Now, getting the work itself done was another trick. Unlike the move, few contractors were willing to take on the restoration effort due to Lucy's substantial deterioration. Ask pretty much any tradesman what happens when you get into a job. There's always something inside the walls or under the floors that's rotting and needs to be replaced that you just didn't account for. Well, imagine how bad it must be when the job in question starts out looking like this. Thankfully, Arthur R. Henry, Herbert Sanford, and Sam Burns agreed to tackle the project, and restoration began in 1973. Lucy would officially reopen for business the following year. By the summer of 1974, Lucy's restoration effort was still far from complete, but sufficient enough to open for tours once again. A ribbon-cutting ceremony with the mayor and city commissioners was held, and she was open for business. Meanwhile, work continued at the same time as the committee applied for grants. There was another mild hiccup where the contractor actually agreed to complete the metal skin in advance before the grant was actually issued. This was real good because without the skin, the previous restoration work would have been in jeopardy. Unfortunately, this altruistic act also prevented the release of said grant because the government doesn't pay for work that's already been done. To be fair, the government eventually released the money anyway, and the contractor was paid, albeit a little later than was promised. And by 1976, Lucy's metal skin was complete, just in time for the country's bicentennial celebration, and she earned recognition as a National Historic Landmark. Where once her future was uncertain, today Lucy is in good hands. From her beginnings as a gimmick for Mr. Lafferty's property holdings to her longevity under the stewardship of the dedicated Gertson family, who owned her for 80-some years, Lucy and her sister buildings have meant a lot of things to a lot of different people. Whether inspiration for an iconic French cabaret, a new start for a young girl who had lost most everything, or a family tradition for 3 generations, taking up the Gertsons' long-running mantle was the committee, which since 1969 has made great accomplishments in bringing this picturesque Margate elephant to the city, state, and nation, and ensuring her preservation for years to come. That'll about wrap it up for me. If you stuck with me this long, thank you so much for watching. Sources in the description. This has been Words and Coffee. Until next time.